There was a kind of fame fashion used to create that now feels almost impossible to explain to anyone who did not live through it. For a brief stretch, a model could become so widely recognized that she reached far beyond the people who bought designer clothes or followed runway shows. Her face moved through television, magazines, music videos, billboards, airport kiosks, beauty counters, and checkout lines until she stopped feeling like an industry figure and started feeling like part of public life itself. That scale came from a media world with fewer gates, fewer screens, and far fewer people competing for attention at the same time. Once those conditions disappeared, the supermodel era went with them. What faded was larger than one profession. It was a whole system for producing shared icons, then sending them into the culture until they felt permanent. The idea of an it girl predates the supermodel era by decades. Clara Bow became closely linked to the phrase after the 1927 film It, and the label endured because it gave people a quick way to describe a quality they recognized on sight but struggled to define. In practice, though, it has always depended on repetition. A culture starts agreeing that someone has magnetism after the same face appears often enough, in enough places, that recognition begins to feel natural rather than manufactured. That helps explain the rise of the supermodel more clearly than beauty alone ever could. The women who reached that level were striking, distinct, and unusually compelling on camera. They also emerged inside a media structure capable of repeating a narrow group of faces until those faces became unavoidable. Fashion magazines, television, outdoor advertising, talk shows, and runway coverage formed a tight loop. If one woman kept appearing inside that loop, her image could travel to millions of people who had no real interest in fashion and no conscious plan to follow it. The old it girl was never just a person. She was the result of selection and circulation. Editors chose her. Advertisers backed her. Photographers refined her image. Producers extended her visibility beyond fashion. The public felt the charm, but the machine multiplied it. That machine worked because there were still enough common channels for culture to move in one direction at scale. Now the channels are everywhere, which means attention is everywhere too. Fame still exists. Public obsession still exists. Huge followings still exist. Yet the path toward dominance has changed.
Because I think if you just open yourself to everything, chances are some good things are going to come and some bad things are going to come. But if you're closed off, nothing can get in.
And instead of a handful of figures occupying the same cultural center, visibility now fractures across platforms, fandoms, algorithms, and smaller audience worlds. Influence can still be intense, but it is spread out, unstable, and often separate from the broader public. That shift is the real beginning of this story. Before Naomi Campbell, Cindy Crawford, and the others who came to define the peak of model fame, there was a long period when models were not treated as personalities at all. They were expected to present clothes, control their movements, and keep their own identities in the background. To understand how the supermodel became possible, you have to start with the period when the industry tried very hard to prevent that from happening. Modern fashion history usually points back to the 19th century when couture houses began showing garments on live bodies instead of relying only on static display. That change seems simple now, though it altered the logic of fashion presentation. Clothes looked different in motion. A sleeve shifted, a hem swayed. Fabric gained life on a person that no dress form could provide. The body became necessary to the sale. The person inhabiting that body remained secondary. That is where the language of mannequins enters the story. Early fashion models were often called mannequins, and the term told you exactly where they stood in the hierarchy. A mannequin existed to show a garment as cleanly as possible. She was there so the client could understand the line, cut, and movement of the clothes. Individuality did not carry much value. And if anything, too much personality could distract from the real subject, which was the garment itself. The work lacked the glamour later attached to it. It was labor in a tightly controlled environment. The job required posture, poise, stamina, precision, and a body that fit the client's needs. Over time, agencies and booking structures gave the profession more shape. One major turning point came when Ford Models was founded in New York in 1946. Agencies like Ford helped turn modeling into a more organized business, with scouting, contracts, recurring clients, portfolio building, and a clearer path from newcomer to booked professional. That professional structure changed the scale of what could happen next. Once a model could move from client to client while building a recognizable resume. The industry had a way to turn repeated employment into broader visibility. A face could begin as useful labor and grow into a marketable asset. The body still remained the central tool of the profession. Now the tool could also carry a name, a booking history, and eventually a public image. Standardization deepened alongside that change. Height ranges, clothing sizes, sample fit, and body proportions became part of the profession's sorting system. Agencies and clients treated those requirements as routine, which made beauty appear objective when it was really being filtered from above. The more formal the business became, the more the industry trained itself to think of desirability as something that could be measured, narrowed, and approved. That is part of the contradiction at the center of modeling. Fashion wanted bodies that could disappear into clothes, yet it kept discovering that memorable women sold more than anonymous ones. The profession developed through control, repetition, and replacement. The next phase began when the industry learned that presence could also be profitable, and that a face the public remembered had a value no silent mannequin ever could. By the 1960s, the industry had started to learn a new lesson. A model did not have to remain faceless to be effective. Youth culture, fashion photography, magazine circulation, television, and a faster-moving public image economy changed the role. A model could begin to stand for a mood, a city, a decade, even a generational attitude. Twiggy became one of the clearest examples. Once the British press turned her into the face of '66, her rise happened with unusual speed. Her image was immediately identifiable, and her name moved beyond fashion pages into products and broader public recognition. She did not simply appear in clothes. She came to signify a specific moment in culture. That difference was enormous. The public was no longer reacting only to the garment. It was reacting to the person carrying it. Jean Shrimpton pushed a related shift from another angle. Her image became tied to the look and energy of swinging London, a scene that represented youth, modernity, and a break from older ideas of elegance. Verushka, in her own way, showed how a fashion figure could move across media and remain legible outside a runway or magazine context. These women still worked inside fashion, but their faces no longer belonged to fashion alone. Advertising helped accelerate that change. Campaigns started selling identity, aspiration, and lifestyle alongside the product itself. Once the image had to carry a fantasy beyond the clothes, the model's own presence gained new weight. A memorable face could hold the eye longer. A memorable woman could anchor a mood. And once attention started converting more directly into commercial value, its distinctiveness became an asset instead of a problem. Runway culture changed with that logic too. Fashion shows moved gradually away from tightly controlled trade presentations and toward performance, staging, music, and visual impact. The room had to respond. The show had to register. The model's walk, expression, and aura became part of the event. She was still hired to carry the clothes, but the audience was now looking at her as well, and the industry had started to see the financial upside of that attention. None of that made the system generous. Standards stayed narrow. Casting remained selective. Many working models were still treated as interchangeable, yet the old rule had cracked open. If the public attached itself to a model as a person, her value rose sharply. That insight would become one of the foundations of the supermodel era. Fashion had discovered that individuality could be packaged, sold, and repeated at scale. The supermodel era formed when several forces finally aligned. Agencies strong enough to build careers, magazines with huge reach, television, music video culture, major advertising budgets, and a growing appetite for personalities larger than the garments themselves. One of the clearest markers arrived in January 1990, when British Vogue published Peter Lindbergh's cover featuring Naomi Campbell, Cindy Crawford, Linda Evangelista, Christy Turlington, and Tatiana Patitz. The cover did more than present 5 successful models. It framed them as a cohort, a generation, a class of women whose faces carried cultural weight beyond any one booking. The image looked like a declaration, and that was part of its power. Later that same year, George Michael cast the same group in the video for Freedom 1990. A fashion image moved directly into pop culture circulation through MTV and mainstream music television. Then came the Versace runway finale that brought several of those women together again in a moment that lived far beyond the show itself. Seen one by one, these might have looked like striking individual bookings. Seen together, they showed an industry pushing the same faces through multiple media channels until they became cultural facts. That concentration created a specific kind of fame. Naomi Campbell could appear in a magazine, on television, in tabloid coverage, on a billboard, and in public conversation about glamour itself. Cindy Crawford could shift between fashion and mass advertising without losing prestige. Linda Evangelista could signal high fashion while still functioning as a mainstream name. The faces held their meaning even as the context changed. Money followed visibility. The top tier earned sums that made them feel less like workers and more like brands. They appeared on talk shows, in celebrity coverage, in beauty campaigns, in business ventures, and in the orbit of musicians and actors. The model no longer sat quietly inside the industry. She occupied public life. The word supermodel had circulated before this peak, but the early 90s gave it a shape almost anyone could understand. These women were not important because they simply modeled better in some neat, technical sense. They became important because they functioned as symbols. Their names traveled. Their faces stayed legible across media. Their recognition no longer depended on a single client, photographer, or season. That is what made the era feel sealed and complete. Fashion had produced celebrities whose fame could survive outside fashion, then return to it with even more force. The system was now operating at full power. Part of what made this era feel so huge is that the women at its center did not blur together. Naomi Campbell projected force and danger in ways the camera amplified beautifully. Cindy Crawford carried broad commercial appeal while still reading as aspirational and polished. Linda Evangelista had a colder edge. Christy Turlington brought calm, balance, and refinement. You could place them side by side and still feel the difference immediately. That difference helped define the era. Earlier fashion systems often favored uniformity and replacement. The supermodel era rewarded recognizability. Editors wanted a face that made an editorial feel like an event. Brands wanted a woman who brought her own charge into a campaign. Runways became more theatrical, and fashion shows leaned further into spectacle. The presence itself had become part of the product. The wider culture magnified that effect. In the late 20th century, celebrity moved more easily across industries than it had before. Models could appear in music videos, television interviews, beauty contracts, magazine profiles, licensing deals, gossip coverage, and major ad campaigns without losing the aura that made them special. The boundaries between fashion fame and mainstream fame had grown thin enough for one world to feed the other. A shared media environment made that possible. A teenager in Tokyo, an editor in Paris, and a grocery shopper in Ohio could plausibly know the same names because public attention still converged in enough common places. Glossy magazines mattered, television mattered, outdoor advertising mattered, music television mattered, and a few channels still had the power to reach huge numbers of people at once. This is the part nostalgia keeps circling back to. People remember the women, of course. They are also remembering the experience of collective recognition. A small set of faces had become common cultural property. You did not need expertise to know who they were. You only had to exist inside that media world long enough to encounter them again and again. That scale changed how modeling looked from the outside. The profession began to seem like a direct route toward wealth, access, travel, and cultural power. For a tiny top tier, that image had some truth in it. For the industry as a whole, it was a fantasy built from exceptions. The supermodel era sold the dream through the visibility of the few. That illusion remained powerful long after the average working model's reality had drifted far away from it. The supermodel era produced real icons, though it also rested on exclusions and pressures that become easier to miss once memory turns glossy. Fashion's most celebrated years still enforced narrow ideas about size, age, race, and beauty. Those standards did not stay inside the runway. They moved outward into magazines, advertising, beauty culture, and everyday comparison. The racial record shows that clearly. Donyale Luna became the first black model on the cover of British Vogue in 1966. Naomi Sims broke another barrier with the cover of Ladies' Home Journal in 1968. Beverly Johnson became the first black woman on the cover of American Vogue in 1974. Naomi Campbell later became the first black woman on the cover of French Vogue, and the first black woman on the September cover of American Vogue. Each milestone was historic. Each milestone also marked how long the gate had stayed closed. So when the era gets described as universal, the word needs care. The imagery was global. The central roster remained selective. Naomi Campbell stood at the very center of the era, and her place there was genuine. Her success also existed inside an industry with a long record of exclusion that did not vanish simply because one barrier-breaking figure rose to the top. Body pressure sat just as deep in the system. Modeling had long treated the body as something that needed constant management. Height, sample size, skin, hair, weight, posture, and measurements carried direct economic consequences. Long before social media intensified appearance anxiety, the profession had already normalized the idea that a body could be monitored like an ongoing project. The effect reached the public too. Fashion imagery shaped expectations around beauty, desirability, and who deserved to be seen as aspirational. The supermodel era proved especially powerful because it felt human and unreachable at the same time. These women seemed alive, specific, charismatic, and somehow still above ordinary life. That tension helped sell the fantasy. It also helped hide the damage tucked inside it. The burden on models themselves stretched beyond public image. Staying employable could mean relentless self-surveillance, costly upkeep, uncertain income, and judgment delivered in minute detail by people with hiring power. The body functioned like a resume that had to remain on display. And one of the hardest truths inside modeling has always been this: the industry can make discipline look effortless while burying the labor and anxiety required to maintain that illusion. The supermodel era did not end with one dramatic break. It weakened because the machinery that created it stopped operating in the same way. By the turn of the millennium, fashion magazines increasingly favored actresses, singers, and already famous public figures on covers that might once have helped build a model into a household name. Instead of manufacturing recognition from inside fashion, the magazine could borrow recognition from outside it. The wider culture moved in the same direction. The late 90s and early 2000s pulled fashion and entertainment closer together. Red carpets grew more central. Hollywood stars became style authorities. Fashion coverage flowed through celebrity media with increasing ease. Models still worked, still booked campaigns, still walked shows. They no longer occupied the same cultural territory. The emotional climate shifted too after the attacks of September 11, 2001. New York Fashion Week was disrupted directly, and the industry entered a different atmosphere. Spectacle did not vanish. The mood changed. The economy changed. The appetite for one kind of glossy excess cooled, while fashion searched for a different footing. Then, the internet changed the deeper logic of fame. Once visibility became platform-based, continuous, and personalized, attention stopped flowing through the same bottlenecks. The public no longer received one narrow package of faces from a small set of dominant gatekeepers. Audiences fragmented. So different subcultures followed different stars. Recognition intensified inside niches while thinning across the population as a whole. That helps explain why modern visibility often feels busy rather than monumental. The internet can make someone famous to millions. It rarely holds the entire culture still around one figure for very long. The feed keeps moving. Attention becomes renewable, disposable, and audience-specific. That is very different from the old supermodel structure, which relied on scarcity, distance, and a relatively stable set of gatekeepers. The economics shifted with the media. Brands gained cheaper digital tools, direct access to audiences, and more flexible ways to promote products than the old model-centered campaign system required. A single face no longer had to carry the same burden of mass recognition. The companies could chase smaller, measurable slices of attention instead. Even the emotional appeal changed. The old system sold distance. The new one often sells access. Influencers post constantly. Celebrities maintain their own channels. Public figures share routines, reactions, casual photos, and direct address. That creates attachment, though it creates a different kind. Once visibility becomes constant, mystery drains out of it. Mystery had helped make the supermodel feel larger than ordinary celebrity. By the time all of those shifts had settled in, the old conditions were gone for good. A few women could still become famous. Fashion could still create stars. The culture no longer had the same narrow structure that once allowed a handful of models to dominate public imagination all at once. What replaced the supermodel is not one new archetype. It is a crowded field of partial successors. Some models are huge within fashion and barely register outside it. Some influencers move products on a massive scale without carrying the mystique earlier models had. Some celebrities absorb the campaigns that might once have turned a model into a star. Some women arrive with visibility already attached through family networks. That is where nepotism enters the picture. Kaya Gerber came into fashion with the visibility that comes from being Cindy Crawford's daughter, and she has spoken openly about that advantage. Gigi and Bella Hadid had family recognition and resources before they became leading models. Kendall Jenner entered from reality television and one of the most famous families in entertainment. None of that cancels out ability, as it does show that modern entry points are often shaped by money, access, and built-in attention. That difference matters for another reason. Modern modeling remains unstable for most workers. The mythology created by the supermodel era still lingers, but the average working reality looks very different. Income can be irregular, careers can stall quickly, appearance costs stay high. Personal branding, timing, networking, and luck all carry weight. Success depends on far more than looking good in front of a camera. New labor protections in New York reflect how serious those structural problems became. The state did not step in because the industry was functioning smoothly. It stepped in because long-running issues around transparency, contracts, pay, and worker vulnerability had become too visible to ignore. The meaning of the look has grown less stable too. In commercial modeling, clients may want warmth, familiarity, and broad appeal. In editorial modeling, they may want something sharper, stranger, or more specific to the mood of a season. Presence can carry as much weight as bone structure. Timing can carry as much weight as either. A face may be called perfect one year and wrong the next. That instability is part of why modeling success still looks mysterious from the outside. The standards are real. They shift constantly. There is a final irony in that change. The supermodel represented distance, hard to reach, carefully staged, rarely seen without a frame. Modern fame often rewards the opposite. It favors frequency, intimacy, casual access, behind-the-scenes visibility, and the feeling that a public figure is always available somewhere on a screen. Brands like that because it feels measurable. Audiences like it because it feels personal. Yet the trade-off is clear. Constant visibility rarely produces myth. It produces familiarity. That is why the supermodel era feels unforgettable and unrecoverable at the same time. It produced a rare form of public recognition because fashion, media, and advertising were aligned in a way that concentrated attention instead of scattering it. A small number of women became symbols large enough to travel across borders, industries, and demographics while still feeling singular. That scale came from repetition through a narrow set of channels strong enough to turn familiarity into cultural fact. The system changed, covers changed, advertising changed, celebrity changed. The internet changed what it means to be visible. Influence expanded and splintered at once. More people can now be known by someone, somewhere, at almost any moment. Far fewer can become the face everyone knows. That does not make the present weaker in every sense. It makes it different. The old order ran on scarcity, gatekeeping, rigid beauty standards, and exclusions that harmed many people while elevating a few. Its glamour carried a cost. Its myths carried omissions. Its icons were real. The structures deciding who got to become one were real too. So when people say the supermodel era will never return, they are describing more than a shift in taste. They are describing the end of a media arrangement that once let fashion crown a handful of women, then send them into the culture until they felt unavoidable. Naomi Campbell, Cindy Crawford, Linda Evangelista, Christy Turlington, and others reached the height they did because they were extraordinary, and because the culture around them still knew how to produce shared idols at scale. That is also why nostalgia can feel incomplete. And it remembers the magnitude and softens the machinery. It remembers the faces and trims away the gatekeeping. It remembers charisma and leaves out labor, exclusion, and the controlled scarcity that made charisma look larger than life. The old system could produce symbols with enormous force. It could also decide who never got the same chance. And that may be the real loss people keep reaching for when they talk about the era with such force. They are describing a time when public attention still had a center, when fashion could place a face inside that center, and when enough people were still looking in the same direction for that face to become part of common memory instead of just passing image. That condition is gone. Without it, the age of the supermodel does not come back. It stays where it belongs now, in history,